It's crazy. So you mentioned they're malevolent, they're malicious, these agents. I don't think people really understand that. I want to talk about Richard Trask. Richard Trask was the Bureau's public face for this case. He was the guy that wrote your criminal complaint. He signed off on it. He was at your preliminary hearing, right?
Yep.
Testified.
Testified.
He was their star agent, right? This man is disgusting. He attends a swingers party in Kalamazoo with his wife. And when they get home, there's an argument about the party, and he tries to kill her.
Whoa.
You can see the body cam footage. I encourage everybody to watch it. Richard J. Trask, look at his arrest footage. He tries to kill his wife. He bashes her head against the nightstand numerous times. He gets on top of her and he tries to strangle her. There's blood all over the sheets. It's on the body cam footage. You can see it. The police are saying to each other, like, this guy's counterterrorism. He's probably armed. He knows law enforcement tactics. So they're scared. Whoa. The police are saying, don't turn off any of your cameras or your recordings. He fled the scene intoxicated in her vehicle, by the way. So they're calling him.
This is before or after?
This is after we're already in jail. I'm already in jail.
He's in jail.
And
this
he
is while this guy's trying this case. He
this
just testified at your preliminary hearing. None of you guys committed any act of violence. They say you conspired to. This is a man, and there's a correlation with domestic violence and law enforcement. There seems to be something there. So Richard Trask, this federal agent, tries to murder his wife, flees the scene intoxicated in her vehicle, and then the police call him and they negotiate him to turn himself in. They meet him at a parking lot. He's in his underpants. He's got blood on his face, blood on his chest, and they open the door and they say, like, you need to get out of the vehicle. He goes, what's this about? Wow. He's covered in blood, acts like he doesn't know what's going on.
By the way, he went to court. He went to court after that. He still has his guns.
He
still has his firearms. He's not in the FBI. The FBI fired him. But yeah, they didn't try to hit him.
He didn't.
Did this play a role in your trial?
Well, it did, but it didn't, right? I think there were some articles that came out from BuzzFeed about it, so it helped as far as...
I remember this.
But the jury didn't get to hear about it. That's what makes me angry about it.
The jury didn't get to hear about it, but for me, like, spiritually, right, when we're talking about God and we're talking about spirituality and stuff, it was a sign of hope to me. It's like, I knew these guys were like that, and if they're doing shit like this and getting caught up, the truth is going to come out and they're going to get exposed.
Oh yeah.
It is crazy to me, I think about this stuff. We don't need conflict. We don't want conflict. We don't want violence.
Right.
All that needed to happen in this case was for these two guys who pleaded guilty. They needed to say, I will not violate my integrity, my honor by lying for you to hurt someone else. And I guess I don't know for sure, but I'll ask you, would the feds have had any case at all if these two guys did not plead?
No.
None.
And
so it's only because these two cowards were willing to lie for the feds to save their own asses that we've come this far.
Yeah. And I will say too, the court system they protect themselves from seeing the information. So the lawyers try to get in exculpatory statements, out of court statements, basically things that were picked up on the wire while they had all these different informants driving these guys around the country to various excursions, FBI sponsored field training exercises, whatever. They're driving them around and, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
They're driving around these two guys who pleaded guilty, who had lied.
I forgot what I was. Sorry.
What they do is they make up scenarios and they're like, hey, let's do land navigation, right? And you have text messages of the FBI agents texting the informants like, hey, you know what? Let's try land navigation today. Such and such is at work. Why don't you try to hit up this person and that person, see if they're available. We'll pick them up in the vehicle, take them out to eat, do whatever, and say, hey, let's do some land navigation. And then, like what they did to Adam Fox's, they pick them up and say they want to go to land navigation, and then they drive hours up north in Michigan, and they just go drive by like the mansion, the vacation mansion or whatever, and then say,
and then lie.
Right. And then say, yeah, he wanted to do that. They give him a pen and a piece of paper and say, hey, here, why don't you draw a map of the area?
No, they drew that. They sent him pictures. The FBI agents sent him pictures. This agent Lauren Hastings, who was posing as a woman named Elise Marie, which was the girlfriend of another agent that was posing as somebody else online. They sent him, the FBI took pictures of Mackinac Island and they wrote markings on them, and then they sent them to him in Facebook. And then the government used that against him, and they said, oh, look, he got these pictures together for Mackinac Island, and he was showing people this because he wanted to go drive by her house or whatever. They did stuff like this all the time, though. Like, you had these informants telling some of the targets of their investigation, oh, I've been banned on Facebook. I want you to throw this out there. You've got a platform still. I want you to say this about this governor, or, say this, just throw it out there and see what people say. They do things like that. And then they'll use those posts against them later to say, oh, look, in February of 2020, he's complaining about a governor on Facebook. And it's like, well, in February of 2020, you had informants, multiple informants, that were working him and manipulating him and telling him to do these things. And technically, their investigation doesn't start until March of 2020.
Wow.
So why are these informants in contact with people before?
Have there been any convictions?
Yeah, so there's, our trial was the main one. 6 of us charged federally. That was the first trial. I was acquitted on that. On my birthday, by the way, which was absolutely amazing. Best birthday present ever.
I mean, you shouldn't have been locked up in the first place.
Right.
But hey, at the time.
Yeah. And so me and Dan were acquitted on that one. There was a mistrial for Adam Fox and Barry Croft. Now we have the other 2 guys that.
And then after the mistrial, there's another trial, and they got them.
There's a retrial for Adam and Barry.
Yep. And then they had a state case. So what they did was they arrested us 6 guys. And then said that essentially it was this whole group, the Wolverine Watchmen, right? And then we were like the leaders and the enforcers. So then, but how they criminally prosecute is something I've never really seen before, because they take one group because they know they don't have a case, right? They got to separate it. So they get one federal case, and then they separate, 2 other state cases. And so far, the 3 other guys in the state cases, they all got convicted.
Yes,
what happened with that? Wasn't it that certain evidence wasn't allowed to be admitted?
They were charged with providing material support for terrorism, which was like they let somebody use their property for training, or they taught somebody how to tie a tourniquet or whatever. And they're now saying that's like aiding and abetting a terrorist. So what Michigan has very unique anti-terrorism laws that were passed in 2002 in the wake of 9/11 that have enhancements for like aiding and abetting. So if you were like an American citizen and you were like assisting Al-Qaeda, and then an Al-Qaeda terrorist committed an act of terrorism, they're basically saying if you aided and abetted them, you can be charged with the same thing and you'd be punished to the same extent as them. So they had this aiding and abetting thing for that they used on these guys for providing material support. They said they were aiding and abetting
and then
T case.
As soon as they get the plea agreements, they now have the legal standard of this proves it. Yeah. Therefore, anybody who gave them anything, that proves that.
I remembered what I was trying to say. It's complex, I'm sorry. And it's kind of goofy the way he said they had this thing and then they broke it up. So they broke it up into the federal case and then the 2 state cases. They needed the guys in the federal case, those 2 that took the plea deal, to take the plea deal because they needed those convictions so that in the state cases, you can't provide material support for a T Act if it didn't happen and there is no conspiracy. So to get those guys in the state cases, they first had to get you all in the federal case, or at least get somebody to take a plea deal and say there was a conspiracy, and then they can get them for providing material support for that.
Yeah. And the providing material support, what they were claiming it was, Second Amendment protected activity, right? So like you got a group of dudes that like shooting guns and you say, hey, why don't you come over my property? We'll shoot a little bit. And then if those guys, 6 months later get arrested by the FBI, say, well, you were providing material support for these guys. You let them on your property. You shot guns with them. Yep. You helped them successfully try to implement this plot.
They said they were running a terrorist training camp.
Right.
And it's like, wait, you mean the FBI was? Like these are the FBI sponsored field training exercises. The FBI is running the militia group. The Wolverine Watchmen group that he's talking about. They're a small militia group in Michigan, mostly online. It had
Yeah.
like 15 members or something. It's founded in 2019 by two guys, Joe Morrison and Pete Musico. And the FBI takes over almost immediately. Their informant becomes a second in command. And then they say all these other guys that were not members of this militia group that just kind of knew these guys. They said that they were members, and they put together this map with like 45 people, and they tried to say it was a gang. That's the other thing. They have had gang charges for some of the guys that provided material support, the state case. They've given them gang charges. So they're now trying to basically say militias are violent gangs because law enforcement can create task forces to go after gangs, and they can work with the feds for that. So I thought that was a very interesting aspect of this.
They want to talk about providing material support, right? But what did the feds do? The entire time, the feds are giving their informants these gigantic credit cards and telling everyone, hey, why don't you go buy a 50 cal rifle? Or, hey, why don't you go buy like a bunch of ammunition and a bunch of gear? And people are like, no, I'm good. I'll just use my own money.
Yeah.
So no one ever even took the bait on that.
Okay, yeah, the credit cards was for a charity that the informant that was a pedo was running called Race to Unite Races. And he had these credit cards. They were like $5,000 credit cards, or that's what these guys were being told. And they were kind of shoving that towards them at the end because they wanted to wrap this up before the election, but nobody had done anything. And in their text messages, the FBI agents are saying to each other and the informants in like May of 2020, these guys have no plan. They're wasting my time. In September of 2020, the FBI admits that there's no plan, and that's why they have to introduce the undercover agent Red to pose as an explosives expert to try to get these guys to put down a down payment for like a C4 or something, some kind of explosive that could take out a bridge or whatever. Nobody gave this guy money for the explosives, but this is like what they're doing, the FBI, to try to fabricate this and make it look like there was something so they could arrest these guys right before the election.
Wow.